The cell was cold, the metallic walls slick with condensation. Captain Paul Halloway sat against the far corner, his wrists bound by restraints that bit into his skin. The dim, sickly green light from the overhead fixtures cast elongated shadows across the floor, warping the forms of the other prisoners huddled in the cell. The air smelled of sweat, blood, and something else, something acrid and unfamiliar. A sudden clang of boots against metal sent a jolt through his spine. The door to the holding area slid open with a hiss, and 3 alien guards stepped inside. Their forms were sleek, insectoid, their carapaces glistening under the dim light. The largest of them, marked by a jagged stripe of crimson across his chest plate, moved forward, his deep-set eyes locking onto Paul. "On your feet," the alien barked, its translator rendering the command in a guttural, mechanical tone. Paul didn't move, his muscles tensed, every fiber in his body resisting the order. He knew what was coming. The past 2 weeks had been an unbroken cycle of interrogations, torture, and forced witness to the slow executions of his fellow soldiers. The alien stepped closer, impatience evident in the twitch of its mandibles. It reached down and seized Paul by the collar, dragging him up effortlessly. He suppressed a groan as his bruised ribs protested. From the adjacent cell, a voice rose, hoarse but defiant. "Leave him the hell alone." Adam Carlton, Paul's second in command. He was leaning against the bars, fury burning in his hollowed-out eyes. His face was bruised, one eye swollen shut, but he still had enough fight in him to glare at their captors. The alien leader turned, an eerie chittering noise escaping its throat, a sound Paul had come to recognize as amusement. Without hesitation, it raised its pulse weapon and fired. The energy bolt struck Adam square in the chest. He staggered, gasping, before crumpling onto the cold floor, his body still. Paul lunged against his restraints, a roar ripping from his throat, but the guards held him back. A deep, booming voice echoed through the chamber. "Enough!" The room fell silent as a figure stepped through the entrance. Lord Vereshkai, the alien general responsible for overseeing the war against humanity. He was taller than the guards, his presence exuding a cold, calculated menace. His violet-hued eyes studied Paul with detached curiosity. "You humans are fascinating," Vereshkai mused, stepping over Adam's body without a glance. "You hold on to hope even when you have none. I find it amusing." Paul clenched his fists, his breath ragged. "You call this war," he spat, "slaughtering prisoners? Executing men in cold blood? You're nothing but cowards." Vereshkai tilted his head. "War is efficiency, Captain. Mercy is a luxury for the victorious. And you," he gestured to the lifeless body on the floor, "are not the victors." The guards moved quickly, dragging Paul toward the main execution chamber. The walls bore the dark stains of past victims, and in the center of the room stood a raised platform where executions were carried out for all prisoners to witness. The remaining human captives were already assembled, shackled and forced to kneel in rows. Their faces were hollow, their eyes sunken with exhaustion and loss. A massive screen flickered to life above them, displaying the insignia of the Galactic Empire. A live broadcast. This was not just an execution. It was a message. Paul was forced onto his knees, and he could feel the weight of Vereshkai's gaze on him. The general turned to address the camera, his voice smooth and unwavering. "Let this be a lesson to those who resist. The era of humanity is over. Your defiance ends here." A rifle was pressed against the back of Paul's skull. His breathing slowed. His mind raced, searching for an opening, a chance, anything. Then, in the distance, a muffled explosion rocked the facility. The lights flickered. Shouts erupted from the outer corridors. The guards hesitated, their weapons raised. Paul seized the moment. Twisting, he drove his elbow into the nearest alien's abdomen. The impact was enough to send the creature staggering. He lunged forward, grabbing the fallen guard's rifle and firing in one smooth motion. A bolt of blue energy tore through the nearest executioner. Chaos exploded through the chamber. Prisoners surged to their feet, some tackling guards, others scrambling for weapons. Paul didn't stop to think. He fired again, dropping another guard before sprinting toward the security console. He slammed his fist against the emergency override, and the restraints on the other prisoners disengaged. The facility was burning. Smoke curled through the corridors as more explosions rattled the structure. The resistance had arrived. Vereshkai, his expression unreadable, stepped backward toward the exit. "This changes nothing, Captain," he said coolly. "Your kind will still burn." Paul didn't hesitate. He raised the rifle and fired. But Vereshkai was already gone, disappearing into the chaos. He turned to the remaining survivors. "We're getting out of here. Now." No one questioned him. They ran. The war began with fire. 1,000 ships, sleek and angular, emerged from the darkness of space, their hulls reflecting the cold glow of distant stars. Humanity had never launched a fleet of this magnitude before. The combined might of Earth, Mars, and the outer colonies surged toward the Empire's outer defenses, engines burning like dying suns. At the heart of the formation, a single dreadnought loomed. The Black Nova, Earth's most advanced warship, its plasma cannons humming with barely contained fury. Paul Halloway stood on the command deck of the Valkyrie, one of the lead assault frigates. His uniform, now bearing the insignia of the Omega Strike Team, felt foreign against his skin. He had never imagined himself in a position of leadership, not like this. Yet here he was, overseeing the first strike of humanity's retaliation. "Admiral Voss has given the order," a voice crackled in his earpiece. It was Ryan Drake, his second in command, sharp-eyed and relentless. "We're green for attack." Paul exhaled slowly. "All units, weapons hot. We hit them hard and fast. No survivors." The alien station orbiting toward Val 6, a vital supply depot for the Empire, loomed ahead. It was an intricate mass of spires and rotating arms, its hull bristling with weapon emplacements. The Galactic Empire had assumed humans would be too weak, too afraid to counterattack so soon. They had grown arrogant. Paul intended to remind them why that was a mistake. The first human warships broke formation, streaking toward the enemy station with ruthless precision. The Valkyrie's railguns roared to life, hurling tungsten slugs at near-light speeds. Explosions rippled across the station's outer defenses, shattering alloy plating and sending debris spiraling into the void. The Empire's forces scrambled to respond, energy shields flaring under the relentless bombardment. Enemy fighters swarmed from hidden launch bays, their sleek, insectoid designs twisting through space with unnatural agility. Plasma bolts lanced through the battlefield, searing through the hulls of smaller human vessels. Paul watched as one of their frigates, the Resolute, took a direct hit to its reactor core. A second later, it was gone, a fireball snuffed out by the vacuum. "Stay focused," he muttered under his breath. Ryan's voice cut through the comms. "They're scrambling reinforcements from the surface. Ite, 3 minutes." They didn't have 3 minutes. Paul's hands tightened around the console. "Omega Strike Team, prepare for insertion. We take that station from the inside." The warship's docking clamps engaged as the strike team launched from the Valkyrie in boarding pods, the hulls vibrating violently as they punched through the station's outer defenses. Paul braced himself, heart pounding in his chest. The moment they breached, the air was thick with the stench of burning metal and charred flesh. The alien defenders were waiting. Blaster fire lit up the corridors, emerald streaks of energy cutting through the haze. Paul rolled behind cover, his pulse rifle kicking against his shoulder as he returned fire. The first enemy fell, its carapace cracking under the impact. James Calloway, a hulking soldier with cybernetic enhancements, barreled forward, his heavy repeater spitting plasma rounds. "Push up! Keep moving!" Victor Hale, their demolitions expert, lobbed a grenade down the corridor. The explosion shook the deck, sending alien limbs flying. Smoke curled through the narrow passageways as the team advanced, step by brutal step. Paul's mind burned with a singular thought. This was the price of vengeance. They reached the central control hub, an enormous chamber lined with data consoles and reinforced blast doors. At the heart of it, an alien officer stood frozen in shock, its forearms twitching in fear. Paul leveled his rifle, opened the station's defenses. Now, the officer hesitated. Calloway didn't. His shot was precise, the alien collapsing with a hole through its skull. Ryan moved to the controls, hacking into the system with practiced efficiency, disabling their shields. The station trembled as the last line of defense fell. Human warships poured firepower into the exposed structure, tearing through what remained. The Empire's soldiers broke ranks, some fleeing, others choosing death over capture. Paul stood amidst the destruction, his rifle lowering slightly. This was only the beginning. Within hours, the station was nothing but drifting wreckage. They had sent a message. The Galactic Empire was no longer the hunter. Humanity had become the predator. The war escalated. From the bridge of the Black Nova, Admiral Jonathan Voss surveyed the unfolding conflict with cold precision. He had fought wars before, but never like this. This was not a campaign of conquest. It was extermination. The Empire retaliated swiftly, raising entire human colonies in response. Billions were lost. On the surface of Epsilon Prime, Marcus Caldwell led ground forces through the ruins of what was once a thriving metropolis. The air reeked of death, bodies lining the streets. Civilians, soldiers, all the same in the eyes of the enemy. He wiped the sweat from his brow, his voice grim. No more retreats. No more negotiations. From the remnants of humanity's suffering, steel was forged. New weapons, new tactics, new soldiers. Paul and Omega's strike team became legends, their covert operations cutting the heart out of the Empire's leadership. They struck from the shadows, assassinating key figures, planning sabotage deep within enemy infrastructure. The turning point came when human intelligence intercepted a critical transmission. A royal fleet was en route to Zephyr, the capital world of the Galactic Empire. On board, Prince Kael Varn, the heir to the throne. Paul and his team had a new mission: capture the prince, break the Empire. The final war had begun. The dropship shuddered violently as it breached the atmosphere of Zephyr, the imperial capital world. Flames licked against the reinforced hull as turbulence rattled the soldiers inside. Paul Halloway steadied himself, gripping the overhead rail. Outside the viewport, the sprawling alien metropolis stretched endlessly beneath the violet-hued sky, its towering spires illuminated by the artificial glow of its planetary defense grid. The city was a fortress, its structures woven together by an intricate network of sky bridges and security outposts. The royal citadel loomed at its heart, an obsidian monolith guarded by layers of shields, automated turrets, and elite warriors. Buried within its depths was their target, Prince Kael Varn, heir to the throne of the Galactic Empire. Capturing him would shake the Empire to its core. The cockpit crackled with static. "Omega Strike Team, you're coming in fast." Admiral Voss's voice was clipped with urgency. "Sensors show increased security near the palace. Expect resistance." Paul glanced at Ryan Drake, his second-in-command. The man nodded, his expression unreadable behind his tactical visor. Victor Hale checked his explosives, muttering something under his breath, while James Calloway finished calibrating his heavy repeater. They had been through countless missions together, but this was different. This was the heart of the enemy's power. There would be no second chances. The dropship executed a near-impossible maneuver, banking hard between two towering structures before disengaging stealth plating. The moment the rear hatch hissed open, Paul was already moving. They rappelled down into the depths of the city, shadows swallowing them whole. Wind howled between the megastructures as they navigated narrow ledges and maintenance walkways, avoiding the well-patrolled main thoroughfares. The alien populace below moved in eerie synchronization, oblivious to the predators now stalking their capital. Paul's neural HUD flickered with updates, patrol routes, guard rotations, structural weak points. Every step had to be calculated. One mistake, and the entire city would be on high alert. Ryan's voice was low but urgent. Checkpoint ahead. 6 hostiles armed. They don't look like standard grunts. Paul raised the scope, scanning. The guards were different from the usual Imperial sentries. Heavier armor, stronger posture. Royal Praetorians, the personal guards of the Emperor himself. He exhaled slowly. We go silent. Victor pulled a suppression device from his pack, attaching it to the nearest power relay. The streetlights flickered, and in the moment of darkness, they struck. Calloway moved first, his massive frame shockingly fast, driving a combat blade to the nearest guard's throat. Paul landed his own kill a second later, twisting an enemy's rifle toward their comrade before pulling the trigger. Silence rounds whispered death through the checkpoint. Within moments, the guards lay motionless, their blood pooling on the cold metal. Ryan tapped his comm we're in. Proceeding to Phase 2, they moved deeper into the city, using service tunnels to avoid detection. The closer they got to the palace, the more suffocating the air became. Tension coiled around them, each passing second dragging heavier than the last. Finally, the citadel came into view. Its entrance was sealed by an enormous gate of pure tritium alloy, shimmering under the artificial glow of Zypher's sky. Dozens of guards patrolled its perimeter, their weapons crackling with bioelectric charge. This was no mere security detail. The Empire knew someone was coming. Victor crouched beside the gate, planning a series of high-yield charges along its base. This'll get their attention. Paul glanced at the skyline. No alarms yet. Do it. A muted thump followed by a deep, resonating boom split the air. The gate folded inward, molten slag, spraying across the entryway. Guards shouted in their native tongue, scrambling to respond. Before they could, Omega Strike teams surged forward. Ryan picked off the first sentry with a precise headshot. Calloway, a walking storm of destruction, tore through enemy lines with suppressive fire, cutting down anything that moved. Paul moved with singular focus, his rifle finding targets before they could react. Victor, ever the phantom, weaved through the chaos, planting additional charges to cut off reinforcements. They pushed deeper into the citadel, moving with brutal efficiency. The hallways twisted in intricate patterns, designed to confuse intruders. But Paul had studied the schematics for weeks. Every corner, every blind spot, he knew them all. A reinforced blast door stood at the end of the corridor, its security panel glowing with encrypted alien script. This is it, Ryan muttered, working quickly to override the lock. Give me a sec. They didn't have a sec. The ceiling above them erupted in a hail of fire as Praetorians dropped from hidden compartments, weapons blazing. The corridor turned into a death trap. Paul dove behind cover as plasma rounds sizzled through the air. Calloway roared, gunning down 2 before taking a hit to the shoulder. He grunted, staggering but still standing. Paul gritted his teeth, rolling a flash grenade toward the enemy line. It detonated in a blinding burst of white, giving them just enough time. Ryan bypassed the last firewall, and the blast door slid open. Move! Paul barked, hauling Calloway through the threshold as Victor triggered another charge, collapsing the entrance behind them. Silence. Beyond the ruined door lay the royal chamber. Prince Kael'varn stood at its center. He was tall for his kind, his violet-hued skin marked with intricate ceremonial etchings. His robe shimmered with golden embroidery, but his eyes, deep unyielding, held none of the arrogance Paul had expected. He did not cower, nor did he call for his guards. Instead, he regarded the humans with something unreadable. Paul leveled his rifle. You're coming with us. The prince exhaled through his nostrils. And if I refuse? Ryan took a step forward. Then we do this the hard way. Kael'varn's gaze flicked toward the ruined entrance, then back to Paul. His expression did not waver. I am not my father, he said, voice smooth, almost calm. Nor am I the monster you believe me to be. Paul's jaw tightened. Tell that to the billions your empire slaughtered. For the first time, something shifted in the prince's eyes. A flicker of something. Regret? No. Something deeper. Before Paul could speak, the chamber shuddered. Distant explosions rattled the walls. His calm crackled. Commander Holloway, Admiral Voss's voice was sharp. You need to get out. The Empire knows you're there. Their fleet just entered the system. Paul turned back to the prince. They didn't have time for this. Let's go, he said. Kael'varn hesitated, then stepped forward. No resistance. No fight. Ryan frowned. Why are you? A deep, resonating boom cut through the room. The palace's outer walls fractured, a shockwave tearing through the structure. Emergency sirens wailed. Outside the shattered windows, the sky burned with incoming fire. Paul activated his calm Valkyrie. We need immediate extraction. Negative, came the response. Enemy fighters everywhere. You need to find another way. Paul's grip tightened on his rifle. They had the prince. Now, they just had to survive. The sky above Earth burned as the enemy fleet descended. 1,000 warships, their dark hulls reflecting the dying light of distant stars, moved with terrifying precision, blotting out the heavens. The Galactic Empire had come to deliver retribution. Humanity's defiance had gone too far, and now the Empire sought to end them in fire. Paul Holloway stood at the command deck of the Black Nova, Earth's last hope. His face was grim, his body battle-worn, but his mind sharp as ever. The captured heir, Prince Kael'varn, stood beside him, bound but eerily composed, his violet eyes fixed on the approaching armada. Admiral Jonathan Voss's voice came over the comms, unwavering. We hold the line here. No retreat, no surrender. Humanity stands, or it falls today. The war had been brutal, but it had led to this moment. The Empire wanted annihilation. Humanity had chosen survival, and Paul would make sure they earned it. Fleet-wide status? Paul asked. Ryan Drake, stationed at the tactical console, relayed updates with sharp efficiency. Defensive grid at 60%. Outer colonies have sent reinforcements, but we're still outnumbered 5-1. Ground forces are prepared, but if they break the orbital defenses, we'll be fighting on the surface. Victor Hale, standing near the weapons terminal, smirked. Let them come. I've been waiting to see what these bastards have when they're backed into a corner. Paul turned his gaze back to Kael'varn. The prince had been silent since their escape from Zypher, studying his captors, calculating. Now he spoke. My father will not accept surrender, Kael'varn said, his tone devoid of fear. He will burn your cities, slaughter your people, and carve the name of the Empire into the ruins of your world. Paul met his gaze without flinching. Then we burn them first. The first shots of the battle erupted like thunder. The Empire's fleet opened fire, plasma lances tearing through the void. Earth's defenses answered with a coordinated barrage, railgun rounds and missile salvos streaking through space. The Black Nova led the counterattack, its experimental weaponry cutting through enemy lines with merciless precision. Explosions flared across the battlefield. Human and alien warships clashed in a chaotic ballet of destruction, debris tumbling through space as vessels were torn apart. Paul gritted his teeth as the hull shuddered beneath him. Calloway's voice crackled through the comms. Enemy boarding parties incoming. They're hitting multiple sectors. Paul cursed. The Empire wasn't just fighting from orbit. They were bringing the war inside. Seal the lower decks. Paul barked. All strike teams, engage at will. The lights flickered as alarms blared through the ship. Paul grabbed his rifle, adrenaline surging. Drake, hail with me. Calloway, hold the bridge. Ryan and Victor nodded, already moving. The corridors of the Black Nova had turned into war zones, firefights erupting at every junction. Alien soldiers, their armor reflecting the dim emergency lights, pushed forward with brutal efficiency. Plasma fire carving into human defenses. Paul moved with ruthless precision, his rifle kicking against his shoulder as he cut down the first wave of intruders. Ryan moved alongside him, his shots clean and efficient. Victor flanked from the side, tossing a grenade that sent a trio of enemies sprawling. They pressed forward, clearing corridor after corridor. But the enemy kept coming. "This isn't just an attack," Ryan said between shots. "They're trying to take the damn ship." Paul knew he was right. The Black Nova was Earth's strongest warship. If the Empire seized it, the battle would be lost. They reached the main engineering bay, where the fiercest fighting raged. The Empire's forces had breached the ship's core, their warriors holding defensive positions, pushing toward the reactor. Paul's mind worked fast. They couldn't let the reactor fall, but they also couldn't afford to fight a prolonged battle here. Then, an idea. He activated his comm, Calloway. "I need emergency decompression in engineering. We vent them all." There was a brief pause before Calloway's gruff response. "You're still in there?" Paul took cover behind a bulkhead as plasma fire streaked overhead. "Do it." A warning klaxon blared. Red lights pulsed along the walls. The emergency bulkhead slammed shut behind them, sealing them in with the enemy. A second later, the airlocks disengaged. The sudden shift was instant. The artificial gravity fought to compensate, but it wasn't enough. The Empire's soldiers screamed as they were sucked toward the open void, their bodies tumbling into nothingness. Paul gripped onto a stabilizing rail, muscles straining. Ryan and Victor did the same, barely holding on. After what felt like an eternity, the emergency seals re-engaged, slamming shut. The gravity stabilized. The enemy was gone. Paul exhaled, his grip loosening. "Report." Calloway's voice came through. "Reactor secure. We're holding, but not for long." Then the bridge comms crackled again. "Sir," came the voice of an officer. "We're receiving a transmission from the Emperor." Paul exchanged a glance with Ryan before nodding. "Patch it through." The main holoscreen flickered to life. A towering figure appeared, adorned in dark imperial regalia, his piercing eyes burning with cold fury. Emperor Zorath. His voice was like stone grinding against steel. "You have taken my son. You have desecrated my world. And yet, you still breathe." Paul squared his shoulders. "You came to slaughter us. We return the favor." Zoratha's expression remained unreadable. "Surrender him to me, now, and I will grant you mercy." Paul glanced at Kael'varn, who stood unbound beside Calloway on the bridge. The prince's gaze met his father's, but he said nothing. The silence stretched. Then Kael'varn stepped forward. "No." Zoratha's expression flickered, only for an instant. "You misunderstand, my son. This is not a request." Kael'varn's voice was steady. "And you misunderstand, father. You have already lost." Paul's breath caught. The prince turned to him. "Broadcast everything." Paul hesitated, then understood. He activated the ship's wide-range transmission, linking into the Empire's open comms. Kael'varn spoke, his voice echoing across the stars. "The Empire is ruled through fear, through genocide, through endless war. It ends now." Silence. Then murmurs across the comms. The Empire's forces hesitated. Paul could see it. The fracture, the doubt, the turning tide. Zoratha's comm cracked. "You will burn for this." Paul gripped his rifle. "Not today." The Black Nova fired point 2, a concentrated plasma lance, searing through the void, straight toward the Emperor's flagship. The shields held for only a moment before the ship erupted in a cataclysmic explosion, tearing apart the fleet's command structure. The Empire's forces faltered. Humanity did not. The fleet surged forward, pushing the enemy back. One by one, the Empire's ships fell. The battle that had begun as Earth's last stand became its greatest victory. As the last enemy warship fled into the void, Paul let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. It was over. The bridge was silent, save for the hum of systems coming back online. Ryan clapped Paul on the shoulder. Victor grinned through the blood on his face. Calloway gave a single nod. Paul turned to Kael'varn. What now? The prince looked out at the wreckage of the Empire's might. His expression was unreadable. We build something better. Paul exhaled. For the first time in a long time, there was hope.